TNT, a podcast that unpacks contemporary national issues and advocates for more effective representation and innovative solutions related to those challenges facing all of us. Tune in for fact driven insights and stakeholder perspectives, and learn how you can do your part to make a real difference. Subscribe on YouTube and follow on social media for updates. Now, let's get started with this episode of Unboxing TNT with your hosts, Anarion Mason and Rudolph Hanamji.
Hello, 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 and welcome to episode 8 of Unboxing TNT, where we'll be looking at the opposition leader's response to the budget 2025. I'm Rudolph Hanamji, and once again, I'm being joined by my co host, Anarion Mason. Anarion, episode 8.
Yes, Rudolph, it is. And before we begin, we remind our viewers and our onlookers, our friends and well-wishers, to hit that like and subscribe button. Follow us along on YouTube for weekly updates as well as our socials: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X, formerly Twitter, for regular update content and new releases. So,
And I want to just let our viewers know Anarion is a trooper this episode. He's a little under the weather. So Anarion, we're very, very happy that you are literally staying true to form and uh, putting your energy into being here to represent, even though you are not feeling 100%. So thank you for your efforts.
well, consistency is key, and as I was taught at a very young age by none other than Professor Don Jacob out of Purple Dragon
Hmm.
about what discipline is, and he defined discipline as knowing what is right, doing it at all times, even when you don't feel like it. So, with that
I
being
think we
said,
should adopt that. Certainly. Here's to Don Jacob. He impacted so many people's lives. I want to say tens of thousands, perhaps, over the years.
there's locally, remember, Don Jacob and Purple Dragon is an international school
There you
throughout
go.
the UK, North and South America, and Canada as well. So,
Amazing.
and it's managed by one person, yet we have multi-conglomerate companies that are managed by teams that can't do what he does. But we digress. Let's not.
Just a little, perhaps, but yes. So, we're here to discuss the opposition leader's response to the national budget for 2025.
Of
Uh,
course.
but as we usually kick things off with uh, some some ideas to why we chose our backgrounds this evening, I'll let you start off with yours because it looks vaguely familiar, but
Well, based on
different.
how the program and the platform we're using crops things, you can't see the entire thing, right? But it is the globe surrounded by all 17 UN SDGs.
I
And the
thought I
reason
knew what those were, right? Uh-huh.
the reason I choose this is the world and all United Nations countries have a mandate towards Vision 2030. And I, as a young person, I would expect that our budget aligns with the different goals. So there would
Fair
be
enough.
funding towards no hunger, funding towards quality education, water for all, and things like that. And this is a
Mhm.
clarion call to persons my age, younger and older, that if you are passionate about the 17 goals or you want to learn more, tune into our social medias and send us an email right here at We Must Do at our part to become involved in the Inspire 360, which is geared towards that very same concept of all 17 goals. Now,
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
what does your background indicate? I'm seeing a partial sunset.
So interestingly, this is a photograph from one of the abandoned World War II bunkers. when
Mm-hmm.
you trek up to the tracking station in Chagramas, you pass by this abandoned bunker as you round the corner on the last leg before the incline that takes you up to the abandoned satellite dish. And I always found that this is one of those bittersweet type views because I would normally go up there, as this photograph suggests, on an afternoon around sunset time, and you get this amazing view of the Gulf and the different hues of the sky as the sun sets. But at the same time, you're next to this old abandoned building that we really didn't maintain and could have probably used for something productive in our modern world. But perhaps, like the sunset itself, we sort of took it for granted and let it pass. And it's now just a structure that has no capacity. So it just sits there, and it should remind us that when we are gifted with resources and assets, we should use them better. And like you, I think that the budget should reflect on what we already have and what we can build on and make better use of it, because resources are so limited. So we shouldn't let anything go to waste, and we should have value, but take time and reflect and appreciate what we have before it's gone, like the sunset. So that's why I chose that photograph.
Well, interestingly enough, I can't remember seeing that building on the numerous occasions I've made it to the tracking station. But that may have been because I was dying out of breath when I was rounding that corner.
So your brain just couldn't process.
Possibly not. I know there is a big building when it plateaus to the left hand side. There's
Right.
the track that takes you to the tracking station, and then as you continue
Hmm.
a little bit again, there's an abandoned building. Is that the building?
No, this is
This is
before
before
all
that.
of that. Before all, so when you come up the first main incline,
Hmm.
you should remember it makes a bend. At one point, it turns right.
Right, right, and
That
you can
this is on the
over out
left.
see.
Correct. That is
Right,
where this is.
right, and it plateaus, and there's an area you can go and sit down and watch the ocean and things like that, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So
I
I
think the
encourage
ocean may have
anyone
taken
listen.
away my have taken my passion from there, from looking left, and I would have looked at the ocean.
I encourage anyone who's never made the journey to do so. It's a fantastic walk and beautiful. It's definitely worth the journey when you get to the top and you are able to enjoy that, not just the victory of making it up, but the view and the beauty of nature. And going back down is much easier, of course.
But going back down is 1,000 times easier. You tend to need to hold brakes when you're going down because your legs are so tired they just want to carry you without stopping.
Well, Anarion, as you say that, given all the budget commentary, there are
Mm,
many commentators who have suggested that our economy is breaking in different ways, either breaking up or breaking down or breaking as in putting on the brakes, as you just said. So, but then there's the other side, where people are saying we're in growth trajectory, we're doing well, sectors are growing, and that's why we've committed to really unboxing all of the sectors, right, over the next few weeks, to take a microscopic view, if we can, in each industry that makes up each sector, etc., and to really assess where we are at, because that's the point of our part. At the end of the day, we are a portal for accountability and representation for Trinidad and Tobago.
correct. And like we did with the minister's speech, I would like our viewers to see the very beginning of the opposition leader speech, where she went on about how the minister spoke for 5 hours, 5 hours, 5 hours. So, if we
All
can have
right,
that.
let's take that in and we'll start there.
Imagine 5 hours of talk and nothing about lowering food prices. 5 hours of talk and nothing about senior citizens. 5 hours of talk and nothing about generating more revenue. 5 hours of talk and nothing credible about fighting crime.
So she actually spoke for just over 3 hours and 30 something minutes. I think close to 4 hours. So she was
Yeah, close to
shy
4 hours.
of the minister by an hour. And yes, obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but well, obviously, if you take her words on face value, she's one of the commentators that believes that the budget didn't provide what it was supposed to. And she, of course, goes on to list a number of things that she thinks it was filled with over 5 hours.
Right. Which we will
I,
get into. But
yeah,
again, before we continue, Rudolph, I'd just like to remind those who are listening on and those who are watching us that we are not dive unboxing the different aspects and the data points that the opposition leader may have referenced in her speech, but we're unboxing how she addressed the nation in that particular speech and
correct.
what stood out to both Rudolph and myself.
Yes, similar to what we did with the minister. We're giving both of them that leeway to, in that we're, for all intents and purposes, we are accepting for these two episodes on face value their positions. We're
Right,
not endorsing them, we're not criticizing them necessarily, but we're just asking a few questions. As we did with the presentation, we're suggesting to citizens that there are certain questions that they should be asking when they hear some of these statements. And that's an interesting question that was been raised of how long in Aryan should a budget presentation actually be, and what should the format for that presentation be. There seems to be some consensus around the fact that in the budget one should present an assessment of some sort in
hmm,
terms of this is what was expected, or the expectations that were set last year, this is what we were able to achieve. And then from there, I suppose you could advance what are some of the gaps or KPIs that you want to achieve this year. And as a result, these are the levels of expenditure. But we only have so much revenue, and therefore this is the deficit, and that's how we're going to make it up. I mean, to me, that would be such a simple flu.
correct.
Bam, 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 bam.
I agree. I fully agree. And you see, they tend, persons who read the budget nationally tend to go straight into revenue, expenditure,
Hmm.
and deficit.
Hmm.
But there's no accountability, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, uh, about the shortcomings of the last budget. So we would have earmarked, let's say, for example, $1 million towards restoration of a specific community. But that wasn't
Hmm.
done. Where did the money go? There's no accountability, no transparency in that regard in the budget statement. And I think citizens want to know what happened to the 50 something billion
Yeah.
that was allocated to run the country for 1 year.
I agree. I think that obviously you won't be able to give granular accounts because then it would certainly multiply from 5 hours to maybe 10. But you should at least account at a high level by each ministry and say that last year we allocated X amount for education. We actually spent more or less, and what were some of the key reasons why. You could do that in 5 minutes.
True, very true. We
So,
both know we've presented at different levels in our careers along that line.
so I mean, perhaps that's the point that the opposition leader was trying to make. Of course, in a very deliberate and I would say
Facetious.
facetious manner.
Correct.
But that is her style, I suppose, for where she's coming at it from. But so from there, she actually also commented on the actual metrics of the high level metrics of the budget, which again we did early on look at through the ministers. So let's hear what she had to say about those metrics.
Since taking office, every year, Minister Imber's projections have been historically wrong on revenue, on expenditure, on deficit, and on debt, and many other metrics. In this year's budget statement, for example, at page 150, the minister estimated revenue of 54.224 billion. Let me repeat that, 54.224 billion in revenue for fiscal 25. Minister broke it down into oil revenue of 14.174 billion, non-oil revenue of 35.039 billion, and capital revenue of 4.011 billion. Madam Speaker, these figures add up to 53.224 billion in revenue, not 54.224 billion. These figures, given in his own words, as they say from his own mouth, do not add up to the 54.224 billion that the minister told us. Instead, add up to 53.224. This is $1 billion in revenue, less than the budget statement stated. The minister cannot account for the billions of dollars to the Auditor General.
Interesting, simple but interesting point, and I must say we also skirted over that, as did everyone else. It was the first time I heard anyone actually just look at the simple figures and calculate it. It's again, it really underscores that sometimes people take a few things for granted, right? In what's written there.
Right.
Obviously, a
mean,
typo. Obviously, I mean, it's so it's it's a little comical, even though it's so serious. Well, maybe I should say trivial, but because obviously at the end of the day, the as I said, the yellow books that support the budget would add
would be accurate,
to
yeah.
the accurate figure, but we take things for granted.
We do, and then sometimes other people tend to feed on the one mistake that you make. I've stood up in front of patients already and wrote my 9 times table where I wrote one equation wrong. And out of 10, and they would have highlighted the one that I wrote wrong, but not commend me on writing the other 9 correct. And it's the
You
same
sound
thing that the opposition leader is doing.
you sound like Einstein.
Oh, why, thank you. I'm a little bit crazy if you didn't know.
But yes, you were saying the opposition leader.
She seems to be highlighting the errors in things, and I understand the need as the opposition for highlighting the errors, but where is the solution to the errors? Where is
Well,
the the positive
We'll
change that we should expect to see.
Well, hopefully, as we go through the rest of the speech, I agree with you. I would expect that. In other words, if you disagree with the policies outlined, you should present your own case
Correct.
for what should be implemented. Uh, but I do think that this, while relatively a simple matter,
Uh-huh.
it it underscores that you really have to read everything. And even in preparing for your own presentations, you should look at these types of data points or statistics, especially when numbers are concerned, and just double check, because it it's such a serious presentation that you really would want as many eyes on it as possible to just reduce any criticism that it's not prepared robustly. So
Hmm.
I think a little lesson all around. Uh, but
But
she
we
did
do
go on to discuss the actual deficit. Sorry, what were you going to say?
that we thank her for bringing forth such a mystique because no one else picked up on it. All the economists, all the news reporters, and the investigative
Yeah,
journalism and things like that. No one, not even you or myself, Rudolph, who have background in maths and statistics, picked up on
yeah,
it.
we just took the figures for granted that it would add up. But I
Right.
won't be doing that again. So
Likewise. So I'll use my
let
calculator and check 2 plus 2 is always equal to
next
4 from
time
now
we
on.
have to do that. So that's a lesson, folks out there. And remember, you are tuning in to episode 8 of Unboxing TNT, which is brought to you by our portal for accountability and representation for Trinidad and Tobago, our part. I am Rudolph Hanamji, and we're here with Anarion Mason, your co host. And Anarion, we are looking at the opposition leader's response to the 2024 to 2025 national budget.
Right. And just as we said before, we're now saying she went into the debt and the limited revenue generation aspect of the budget. So let's take a quick look at that snippet.
Yes. Mhm.
Sees everyone being treated fairly. The average citizen was not told of these numbers by the minister and his surrogates because the children and grandchildren of the average citizen will have to work and pay all these debts that have been created. This government and the minister have pushed us all, including our future generations, into a debt trap. They keep spending excessively more while creating nothing to generate additional income. I say 9 years or nothing. Where is the Prime Minister's promised plywood factory? Where is the Prime Minister's sandals? Where is the Prime Minister's promised Toko Highway? Where is the not so insignificant sum of money from Bill Gates that the minister said that the Prime Minister said he was getting? Why are we not hearing about Dragon Gas, the Toko Port, the Library Dry Docks, things promised by the Honorable Prime Minister? Somebody said maybe the Prime Minister got pipped.
I haven't heard that saying in so long. When she said it, I did chuckle to myself because my grandmother used to say that when they asked you a question and you weren't answering, she would say, "What happened? You got pip."
Well, that goes to show how mature our opposition leader is.
That's
That should
that
call
is a
that.
euphemism, ladies and gentlemen. That is an example of a euphemism. Uh Anarian, though, well, we were joking about the wit there, that little dig that she sent to the prime minister. But her point is valid. You and I have spoken about that point, and I know a lot of people our age actually are interested in understanding that effect of national debt on us and the generations coming up. That is a serious point. A number of people have spoken about that.
right? And I don't want this as much as that is important that we discussed on both previous
Mhm.
episodes, the budget statement, as well as the episode on the economy. I don't want to skip past the fact that she called out the Prime Minister on several projects that were supposed
Ah,
to be implemented within the past 9, 10 years ago during
yes,
that
yes.
reign. And this is where the portal for accountability and representation comes out, where we have the idea of doing something that highlights all the promises versus all that was delivered and was not delivered, and unboxing deeply as to why such things didn't occur. For example, a lot of people think that Sandals didn't invest into Tobago the way it was supposed to, when it is there were certain beachfront properties that was earmarked for certain development
Yes, that's
that
true.
the government could not have signed off on, which Sandals wanted, and that's why they pulled out. So it's not just something that occurs and we play the blame game. You need to investigate and understand why certain things happened. And it's not that I or Rudolph here is standing up for the Prime Minister or backing up the opposition leader, but we want persons to take that holistic view of things from a neutral standpoint.
And neutrality sometimes means that facts simply are stubborn things. And there will be times when the administration's facts are what they are. And objectively, those facts may be good or bad. And similarly, on the
Mm-hmm.
opposition side or any other organizations or uh, watchdog groups or NGOs side, you will find other facts that hold, and those may also be good or bad. So that is, as you're saying, Anarion, it's important for people to get into the habit of listening to different viewpoints on the same topic and doing their best to analyze what's in front of them, critically analyze what's in front of you, and come to a more informed position.
And that reminds me of my grandmother telling us, me and my cousins, there are three sides to every story. There's your side, my side, and the truth.
Yes,
So people need to remember that little tidbit, and understand what's going
certainly,
on.
certainly. Now, on the talk of revenue, yes, there are some projects out there that are supposed to assist with expanding the non-energy sector, but your industry, for example, remains the main contributor to GDP.
Right. And why is that? Because Trinidad and Tobago was supposed to be the Dubai of the West. And that being said, we still have the oil, we still have the gas, we still export, and there as we go through the energy sector, persons will be able to better understand where that revenue and expenditure comes from. But let's take it at face value. We
Mhm.
push that industrialist mentality and outside more than the colonial farming and plantation economy, because we try to step away from that, and
Yes,
it's all in the mindset of those persons that farming is something that was seen being done during slavery. It's a menial thing, and we
yes,
want to move
yes.
away from
The
that.
poor man's job. Poor man's
Correct.
job.
And that's why, you get big bucks, so to say, for going offshore, for working on a rig, because it's high risk, and
It
people tend to
is,
see
certainly,
see
and it
that.
requires a lot of training.
People, yes, and people tend to see that as the avenue to go, and they look at
Mhm.
creating expansion and job expansion in that area alone. If it is you look at the energy sectors, uh, like revenue, not revenue, allocations versus that of agriculture, there's a
Yes.
big difference. And we need to change that. We need to bring some sort of equity in regards to the various sectors that bring in foreign exchange to Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, let's hear a little bit about the opposition leader's position on what was said about energy, seeing that it is, as the minister very clearly doubled down, remains our focus area given its high proportion in terms of GDP contribution. So let's hear what she has to say about that.
Now, I raise this because for this 391 days, the Honorable Minister of Finance acted for the majority of these days. Well, it was 391, so minus 16 and two more. And then suddenly, the chosen one, Minister Young, was replaced him. Only last weekend, there was an article in the Saturday Express, 28 September 24, in which the Prime Minister told our country to hold strain and prepare for difficult times ahead until 2027. I certainly would not dub the Prime Minister the national tongue crier, although the Prime Minister has been known to have said things that were later proven to be untrue. However, Minister Imbert appeared to insinuate this on Monday when he claimed the economy was doing well. There are different messages from both men who sit in the same cabinet. One who used to act as Prime Minister and the current Prime Minister. Who is the country to believe? Minister Imbert had us believe on Monday everything was hunky dory, everything was booming and glowing and great. But yet the Prime Minister, days before, told the country, hold straight until when? 2027. Difficult times are ahead. Which one of these persons are we to believe? While the Prime Minister tells the country to hold strain for difficult times, we see in the draft estimates of the current expenditure, under head 13, the Office of the Prime Minister, page 58, subhead 02, item 19, that official entertainment under Office of the Prime Minister was allocated $30 million, which is an increase of $29.7 million from 23-24. So in 23, fiscal 23-24,
So, Anarian, again, her position seems to be that this reliance on energy, which is supposed to show the fullest results in 2027, is not a sustainable position. If I'm interpreting what she's saying, or what she's insinuating, I should say. And I think later on, we do have a clip or two where she actually makes that position clearer. But that's what she's getting at, right? She's saying, look, uh, the prime minister is saying, whole strain, which he did, uh, maybe not in those exact words, but he basically said to the country that the next 2 to 3 years will be difficult. However, his outlook is that the gas will flow. And we've spoken about that before on, I believe, episode 6, when we looked at the economy. Are you interpreting it the same way? I think you're going to have to unmute for us, Anarian.
Sorry, I think that I'm seeing that she is showing a contradiction between persons in the same organization, where the Prime Minister says basically hold straight until 2027, while the Minister of Finance is saying our GDP growths are better, that our revenues are coming in, and things like that. That being said, we can have growth without seeing major profits because
Yes.
progress is not always a steady incline. but it's like a sine graph where there's fluctuation. You may go up, you may go down, but once you continue towards working where you need to be, that is the definition of progress. At least to me, that is. Now, again, we're not picking sides, we're just discussing a topic. And that being said, once the figures within
Hmm.
the national budget is accurate, subject to fact and data checking, I
Yes,
strongly believe that the country is moving away from the financial turmoil we experienced both just before the pandemic and through the pandemic. And we're coming out now more stronger. And again, oil and gas is the biggest slice of contributor to the revenue within Trinidad and
certainly.
Tobago. But we need to move away from that, as we would have said
That
in the last episode.
dependence, yes. Yeah, there is sufficient evidence that different sectors and perhaps some very specific industries are performing well and better than the global averages in some instances. The issue remains that even with that improved performance, it is still not enough. And there is still large a large gap between where we could be and where we are. And you and I, and almost every episode to date, we have made that observation as well, that whether it's in the farming sector, infrastructure development, education,
Correct.
for all that is done, for all the billions that are spent, we still don't seem to be getting close enough to where our KPIs should be, especially based on the UN SDGs.
Correct. That is the most important thing, is where we are heading as a country towards sustainability, towards a mandate you would have signed at the Geneva Convention, then the Paris Accord, and most recently reaffirmed to at Dubai at COP 2023. We are supposed to be working towards a sustainable Trinidad and Tobago, and we're not seeing that being tied back to the budget, which is a major concern for young people and young
Yes.
professionals.
Well, I think that that is exactly why we must continue to encourage our generation and even younger ones to really not just consider what is being said and shared in speeches like these or from other pulpits where government agencies communicate. But I
Correct.
think they need to look individually in the mirror at themselves and figure out, where am I going to contribute? How do I leverage my passions to assist in this expansion and growth that is required?
Agreed. I fully agree with regards to that. And I think she speaks on that topic further down, right?
She does. And again, it's 3 hours. So let's see. We tried to pull, and I again, as we did with the Minister of Finance, we're encouraging you to really take the time. And I think Anarion made that joke last time, that whether you're listening to it on your
Yeah.
AirPods in the car or while working out at the gym, because it is on YouTube, so you can pause and return. You should take in
Correct.
the full presentation from the opposition leader. It's not about whether you like someone or you agree with them, but it's you should know what the other perspective is, because she does represent other people's perspectives. Many people would agree with her.
Agreed, yeah. Fully agreed. And what I think we should do here at our part is look at the financial deficit the country has run, or look at the revenue expenditure and deficit for the past 10 to 15 years, and we can put something out on
Mhm.
that. So we show whether it is we're actually increasing debt or decreasing, or whether it's a fluctuation.
So let's see what she says about some of the delivery from the government, which we alluded to earlier.
Consistently, the government of Prime Minister Rowley consistently makes numerous promises under the various heads of expenditure. Data analysis shows this adds up to about 490 budget promises made in the past 9 years. About 490 promises made. The total number of broken promises over the same period is about 373. What? And the total number of repeated promises is about 100. So you have the broken and the repeated. Of these broken promises, the most scandalous, I think, is the Ministry of National Security. Given the state of crime, given the crisis we are in national security. Of these broken promises, national security registers the highest number of broken promises, 51. This is when the crime and violence wave is at unprecedented historic high level. Ministry of National Security is followed by Works and Transport, Public Utilities, Education, Tobago Affairs, Health, Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, and Finance. The other sectors comprise the remainder of the 373 broken promises of this government.
So, again, subject to fact checking, 373 promises over the last 10 budgets apparently have not been kept. Now, that may be subjective depending on how you define delivery. Uh, but even if you take half of that, again, I think persons who are impacted in very specific ways, so whether it's agricultural sector, motorists, teachers, people need to put their mind back a bit, and our part is going to assist with this, as Anarion said. Moving forward, we are going to begin issuing, because of course, just for context, this organization is not even 3.5 months old. But we are going to start issuing some objective reports looking at answering some of these questions. What were the projects that we had committed to and invested in as a nation? What's their current state? And trying to answer for your benefit why they are wherever they are at.
Um, I think we need to go more in depth into the research behind the various sectors before we could answer that, because I honestly don't want to be seen or called upon like the opposition leader called the um, Minister of Finance unintelligent by his lack of arithmetics. So I would love to do the research and have proper data points to present before I could make those inferences. Otherwise, it will just be assumptions, really. And you know what the saying goes about assuming.
Oh, I certainly do. And that's why we're making a call for persons out there across Trinidad and Tobago. If you have an interest in a specific area or technical training, experience, and you'd like to be part of this type of national assessment work, please reach out to us at we must do at our part with 2ts.org and volunteer, because we would welcome your insights and your assistance in getting the right data analyzed and shared in the right way to our citizens. So, on that note, Anarion, the next clip that we pulled actually should look at oil production. And I know that we do have a few members or volunteers with our part who themselves are experts in the oil and gas field. And
Correct.
I would be asking them to consider what is being shared here by the opposition leader and give us some of their own insights. Let's hear what she has to say.
Force of industry experts to report to the cabinet within 90 days on the way forward to restart the refinery. I turn now to Heritage Petroleum. Heritage Petroleum has made no difference to oil production. Heritage has produced less oil after 6 years than Petroleum was producing. So they're boasting that Heritage produced so much oil in their production estimates. But let's face it, Heritage has made no difference to oil production. Heritage has produced less oil after 6 years than Petroleum ever did. Petroleum did. In its last year of operation, 2018, Petroleum averaged 37,558 barrels of oil per day, whereas Heritage has averaged 34,000 barrels per day for 2024. So there is lower. There's not more. It's not more. It has not been better than Petroleum. National oil production, Madam Speaker, is now at 1938 levels. The production has fallen so much, it is now at 1938 levels. We're going backward ever, forward never on the discount. Large pieces of what was once the proud oil industry in places like Santa Flora, Palo Seco, Los Bajo, Point Fortin, Guapo, Parilands, Guayari, Barkpo, Pinal, and of course Pointe-a-Pitre are now in decay and being reclaimed by nature. Places like the Pointe-a-Pitre camp and beach camp now lie in ruin. The boasts about Heritage profitability are hollow and vacuous. Petrotran's exploration and production unit, now called Heritage, was always profitable, always profitable. We believe that saving oil production requires an infusion of private capital, new technology, efficient acreage management, and a deep bottling of the maze of approvals. I turn now to natural gas. As mentioned earlier, the Prime Minister lamented the level of natural gas production and said it would worsen before there was some relief in 2027. When the Prime Minister returned from Switzerland in September 2022, the Prime Minister warned similarly. The Prime Minister said then that he had seen a diagram showing that by 2026, 2027, and 2028, the levels of gas that would be available to TNT would have far-reaching consequences for government revenues and the quality of life for all people in TNT. So, Madam Speaker, what is the population to do? What are the people of Trinidad and Tobago to do for 2025 coming up, 2026, 2027? Do we just hold straight and wait until 2028? Cannot happen. Yes, you're right. You're right. That election, you'll have to choose and vote them out. While this government tries to hide its concerns about Atlantic's restructuring, our LNG production declined by 39.4% from 2015 on our watch, declined from then to 2023, a decline of 39.4%, and will decline further from 2024 right down to 2027. Hold strain, the Prime Minister tells you, hold strain. The consequence of this is the now permanent shutdown of Train 1, while Trains 2, 3, and 4 operate at under 65% of their capacity. They boast that the restructuring allowed third-party gas to be sold to Atlantic. Another mama guy, Please tell us, where will this third party gas come from, and when will it come? Another Malachi. When will it come? In addition, Train 4 is not yet part of the restructured Atlantic, as its commercial arrangements continue into 2026. So we can restructure as much as we want, but the reality is that with significantly less gas being produced, there is less LNG to sell. It would be helpful if the Minister of Energy could say when he expects natural gas to arrive from Dragon and from the Manikin field. In his budget speech, the Minister of Finance repeated the same old story they had repeated for the last 9 years. They say the leadership of a major upstream company told them that when the PNM, came into office, that they would not pay taxes until 2024. False narrative again, feeding that false narrative to the people of our country. So they were telling the country, the leadership of a major upstream company told them that when the PNM came into office, that companies would not have to pay taxes until 2024. That company is no secret, it is BPTT. They posit, this government, that this was because of accelerated capital allowances introduced in mid-2014. That narrative shows a gross lack of understanding of the fiscal regime which underpins the energy sector. When they say pay no taxes, which tax were they referring to, and which tax was the government referring to? Is it SPT? Is it PPT? Is it unemployment levy or royalties? The fiscal regime changed in 2014 with the introduction of accelerated capital allowances, which only affected petroleum profit tax and not the levy. It had no bearing on BPTT's payments of supplemental petroleum tax or royalties. However, the PNM did not immediately change these accelerated capital allowances. They were so vexed with it, but they didn't change it. They didn't move to change it at all. The accelerated exploration allowance expired. It was allowed to expire in 2017 because of a sunset clause that we had introduced in the Finance Act of 2014. And the accelerated development allowance was only changed in 2020. So crying and weeping and wailing and whatever, and if this was so destructive, why didn't you move it? Data will show you from EITI that from 2016 to 2022, what happened? BPTT paid the government 14.7 billion in taxes and royalties, not zero, 14.7 billion in taxes and royalties. Yes, but I can't use untruths. We can say untruths or false narratives. Either the PNM did not understand what the leadership of BPTT was telling them, or they misrepresented what they were told by BPTT. You know what is the irony, Madam Speaker? The irony of all of this false narrative is that the investments under that new regime that we had placed in, that led to the Juniper, the Angeline, the Matapal, the SIP projects, are all directly related to these accelerated capital allowances made by my government. And those are the projects that are coming, bringing in, producing for us now, bringing in the gas and oil.
Anarion, quite a lot was covered in that clip. I mean, as we said, it's quite an important sector, relatively, I should say, not just quite, but it is the most important sector. What are your key thoughts around some of those positions?
Well, Rudolph, those were some very harsh sentiments, but very true. However, I would like to point out several things with regards to Petrotrin and Heritage and the differences. Now, when Petrotrin was flourishing, Let's assume Trinidad had 100 million oil barrels of oil reserved. Petrotrin
Okay.
would have produced from that and sold those barrels. And when Heritage took over, it may have dropped to 25 million barrels. So there is less production. Now,
Mhm.
what persons need to understand that is that each well, as you perforate a well and all right, you drill, you perforate, and you start production, you get a rapid flow of oil and gas coming out. However, when the well becomes more depleted
Mature.
and
Hmm.
depleted, and there is air on top of the oil, you need to do something called either gas injection or water injection. Now, we all know oil floats on water. So you need to fill the well with water so that the oil rises, but that's a very costly procedure. That being said, a lot of wells are not abandoned, but they're capped off when there is low production from it until it's absolutely necessary to spend the money to produce the well once again. Right now, because of the Ukraine war and geopolitical differences in the world, our oil is not being sold the way it needs to be done. Secondly, what the Prime Minister spoke about was gas, not oil in 2027. The Prime Minister spoke about gas from the Dragon gas fields, not the Dragon oil fields, but
Yes, he
gas.
did.
So I would urge the opposition leader to get her facts straight when it comes to things along that line. So whilst we may have low oil production, there is gas production to come forward. Or that being said, also gas is our major. Actually, gas is what we use to turn turbines and do power generation in Trinidad and Tobago. Also, another way to look at things is that the world is moving away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy, and there is no need for major production or high volume production of oil at this point in time. We also need to take into consideration that Petrotrin storage tanks, which were inherited by Heritage,
Hmm.
of dire maintenance needs. And if it is they do overproduce with no demand on the market, you're going to have to store into those containers, which tend to leak, have piping issues, and things like that. And that is an environmental factor as well. So there are lots of different reasons why Heritage is not producing the amount of oil that Petrotrin would have. I hope that
Fair,
clarifies it
fair
for our viewers.
clarification. And again, yes, that is a perfect example of how you can take a position or a statement, and by adding just enough layers, you can have a more balanced perspective on a fact. So it is a fact that we are producing less than in the Petrotrin days, but as you masterfully explained, there's a context for that. And there are possible mitigating interventions that can be taken, but would those be cost effective at the end of the day? So
Correct.
it I look forward to us unboxing oil and perhaps unboxing gas separately in one of our future episodes. Now, where did she take us to next? I believe she
The next thing
would.
that stood out to us
Yes,
I think, would have been the neglect in schools. Because
yes.
you and I are both products of very well maintained secondary schools and then tertiary level education. And that is near and dear to both of us. Education.
So let's hear.
All the money that was spent on those schools, the Shiva Boys School and the Parvati Girls School, they have gone to nature, covered in moss and in vine. For those schools to be restarted, it's going to cost you a lot of money, just like they did with the highway 2.14 going through on the southern side, not through the Mosquito Creek, but on the other side through Mondesi and so on. Just abandoned. All these things will cost massive amounts of money to get them restarted, in the same way that that refinery will cost us massive amounts.
Well, we covered that in great detail when we unboxed education. And it is important for the opposition leader to highlight that fact because we all know the critical role that education plays in stemming a lot of the challenges that we're facing today.
Correct.
So
And it is also near and dear to her heart when she entered the realm of politics. She entered as the Minister of Education.
that is indeed true. That is a fact. Some people may not even know that because they weren't born at the time. So there is a connect for her. That is, I hear you.
And I'm glad she went back to her roots per se when she spoke about places like Barrackpore and Mundisi and things like
Yeah.
that. That's where she's from. So she's not neglecting, she's representing in that aspect. And I must commend her for that. But like you rightfully said, schools are our number one way of long term fighting against crime and poverty
Mhm.
across the board.
Across the board, innovation, creativity. She went on to connect, though, education and crime and justice. So let's take that part in.
There are suggestions. This is something that the new UNC government will certainly consider. And in the transitional period, we can look at where there's a net back. Claims made by companies, net sales tax is remitted. So we can have a, what is it? If you're owing X dollars, then um, you don't have to pay. If we are owing you money, that's it. If the government is owing you VAT refunds, then we match it together and you don't have to pay for your next area and time period for paying VAT. I turn to plans now to secure and rebuild Trinidad and Tobago. And these are, what time is it now? 12:28. Okay, how much time is that? Now? Antenatal and postnatal care services will be improved by purchasing additional equipment to track the health of mothers to be and their babies. Again, we will reintroduce the baby grant. In some other countries, they have a sales tax. You just do a sales tax. There's no what is exempt. For a businessman, especially for smaller businesses, to go through all those. We will categorize the offenses of murder and rape into first degree and second degree. We will introduce a constitutional right of an accused to have a trial within a reasonable time.
I think that those are some very interesting points being made there. The opposition leaders obviously taking the opportunity to respond to the budget to begin enunciating her party's policy positions. So
Right.
while there are no revenue figures or any economic pronouncements being made in relation to, as you just said, what would be the positive knock on effect by some of these proposals. There are proposals now out on the table.
Well, that is what we expect to hear from a budget debate, right? We expect to see a highlighting of where the main debater policies fail or may fail and the recommendation solutions, which we were talking about at the very
Yes.
beginning of the episode. So I'm glad to see that she did that and that we pulled that clip from the speech. What are your thoughts on that aspect, Rudolph?
It's important for us all citizens to consider different possibilities of how we build the country. And yes, the government has its own ideas and technocrats working around the clock to outline these ideas and the structures that would be required along with resources. But it doesn't mean to say that other people don't have a valid opinion as well. Uh, so let's take in a little bit more about what are the other ideas that the opposition has.
We must look to childhood obesity, which then leads to great strain on the health sector and the cost of healthcare. We must look to legislation for front of package warning, labeling to be implemented on retail food products to warn consumers of high sugar, high sodium, and high fat items. This will intensify the existing awareness program for combating childhood obesity and expand their reach. So, upfront, on the labels, if you still wish to buy, that's your choice, but at least you will forewarn. And being forewarned is to be forearmed. We will look to implementing a modern prenatal, maternal, baby, and early childhood care strategy. Expand access to immunization. Implement a multi pronged strategy to deal with reproductive issues and empower women to seek good health during pregnancy. Maternal and child health policy and standard operating procedures for obstetrics and midwifery will be updated and implemented. Antenatal and postnatal care services will be improved by purchasing additional equipment to track the health of mothers to be and their babies. Again, we will reintroduce the baby grant. An emergency response plan will be developed to cover medical crises ranging from natural hazards like oil spills and to infectious diseases. The Health Ministry will make an inter-ministerial arrangement with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, the Ministry of the Environment and Water Resources to address the effects of climate change on human health. We must initiate a national awareness campaign on mental health.
Now, Anarion, again, the opposition leader is touching on areas that, full disclosure, the two of us and other people that we know are passionate about.
Very much so.
I
Very
think it's
much so.
very telling that she's signaling to that circle of icons behind you.
Well,
Issues around health, especially with childhood obesity, NCDs, the environment, mental
goal
health.
number three, most definitely health and wellness.
And I think, to be very fair about it, had the Minister of Finance actually articulated policies under some of these areas, then people would have had a better sense of where the development indicators would be, the the quality of life, and some of the other subjective areas, as we spoke about when we talked about the difference between quantitative and qualitative economic indicators.
Correct. Now, like you said, it's near and dear. Some of those policies you spoke about just now is very near and dear to you, myself, and those around us.
Yes,
But here's my thing, Rudolph. The minister, you were you part of the debate club in your school?
I was the president at one point.
I'm not going to comment on that. But you and I both did debate in secondary school. And how I look at this now is that Colin Imbert, one of our Minister of Finance, set forward a revenue, an expenditure, and a deficit. That
Mhm.
being said, me, if it was me, I as the person who would have debated him, I would have used those same figures and did a different allocation, like what a model budget should look like. So using the same revenue, expenditure, and deficit. Um, so I may have given national security more, taken away from agriculture, things like that, and look towards a more sustainable development for Trinidad and Tobago. And that is how I see debates going. I mean, policies is of course what we should be more inclined to our citizens.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's my take on how an actual op- the opposition was supposed to debate and present a model or a rebuttal to the actual budget.
Yes, I think that it is important when you're rebutting the presentation, because it is a debate. You have to, must refer specifically to the positions taken by the proponent
Hmm.
and present your facts or counter arguments to those positions. Uh, it would be difficult as well, similarly, for people on the administration side to counter some of these recommendations, because one would naturally presume that some of these things do fall already into their wheelhouse and areas that they're looking at. So it, they would have no choice but to agree with the opposition uh, in this regard. Because I don't see the government coming out and saying, "Well, we don't want to deal with NCDs." So it's an interesting pivot that the opposition leader has taken. I know we have time for three more short clips. Let's take in just a bit more about other recommendations that she's had before we look at an overall view of this response.
Conversation. Right. Awesome.
Benefit from capital expenditure, capex from capital expenditure. Two, aside preparing for children to get the best education. Preparation of parents and guardians to assist children to maximize education opportunities. Parents and guardians provide pivotal support for children in the education journey. However, not every parent or guardian has the requisite skills, abilities, and experience. Excuse me. The UNC will provide parents and guardians with the following types of support to enable them to best assist their children during and beyond their school years. Parental training of parents and guardians and caregivers. An inventory of all parental training programs and corresponding resource employment will be undertaken within the government and the private sector. An exercise will be conducted to consolidate understanding of the nature of parental training programs in the government and private sector. A team will be established to develop a parental training framework of critical understandings which all parents should have to allow them to best contribute to the development of our children.
Anarian, I must say that when we spoke about education and some of the challenges being faced, we did talk about concepts like these, whether parents had a responsibility. Of course, they do, but where does the responsibility stop? And if they are negligent, should there be some sort of offense that they would be
Correct.
penalized under? But the opposition leader seems to be taking the equally needed approach of incentivizing better parenting and providing skills training to parents.
Well, Rudolph, I want to believe that she has been looking at unboxing TNT and has taken some of our ideas.
You're welcome.
Uh, but I agree. She's bringing things near and dear now. Her policies are now targeted towards the middle and lower socioeconomic classes of people across Trinidad and Tobago. And as you know here at our part, we care and we value community development,
Yes.
and we
Yes.
we look at things from the ground level come up. And it's good to see that she's taking that approach now.
Yes, and it's important as well to platform ideas such as these because there is a lot of inequity, and that entire topic of family planning and parenting
Hmm.
is so complex because there are many variables. So let's take one last clip in from the opposition leader before you and I give our overall feedback on this 4 hour long rebuttal.
Okay, and let's go.
Physical violence in schools. Any student physically attacking another student must be removed from the school and only be allowed to return after completing neurodiagnostic testing and proper counseling programs approved by the state. We
I must commend that position statement and again for the opposition leader to acknowledge that bullying is taking place in schools because I remember a few years ago when a former minister of education actually downplayed bullying in Anarion. And again, as someone who had suffered bullying myself, I am very much committed to ending that in schools. So there we, I mean, a broad response touching on everything from the metrics to the energy sector, various issues around government delivery, and providing a host of recommendations across all areas of the economy. Uh, again, not enough to my mind in regard with regards to providing actual projections of revenue. So nothing that I heard, I mean, I may stand to be corrected, but I didn't hear anything that said, well, we will do A, which will result in $10 billion in revenue, as an example. And I think that there needs to be some specificity around that. I heard a lot of social outreach programming, private
Which is an
sector, public
expenditure.
sector improvement, but I am still fighting to hear from the opposition as well as the government around the revenue. What about your overall thoughts?
Well, I am waiting to hear about the SFC committee when they meet in the next couple of weeks to present where each line minister identifies the money
Mhm.
that was allocated to them last fiscal year and what they've done with it. That is where I take much of the budget conversations into consideration because there we see the effectiveness, the deliverables, and the lack thereof. And as citizens, we need to hold accountable for the lack thereof. Whilst we applaud what they have done, we need to understand and do root cause analysis and fishbowl analysis as to why
Yes.
this failed or this was unsuccessful because we don't want a repeat of losing millions and billions of dollars at the next fiscal year where the future generations
That
now
is
have
it.
to pay for.
That is it. Well, again, I encourage everyone to take some time and scan through, if not listen to the entire rebuttal from the opposition leader. If anything at all, you'll get a signal as to where the UNC is probably headed in terms of the manifesto for the next election. But more from our point of view, it does provide you with an alternative perspective and and the presentation asked some very pertinent questions. So there you have it. This is episode 8, an unboxing of the opposition leader's response. Relatively quite lengthy, Anarian, just under 4 hours, so an hour short of the minister himself. But uh, as I said, broad. And so what can viewers look forward to in the next weeks ahead for unboxing TNT?
Well, for the next weeks ahead, Rudolph, we are going to start unpacking, not unpacking, unboxing. Let's use the correct term. Unboxing the various sectors across Trinidad and Tobago. So we'll look at things like the creative sector, agriculture, we'll look at national security, uh, education, and so forth, as we move forward into the budget conversations because Trinidad and Tobago tend to look at the budget the day the budget is read and 2 weeks after, and that's it, it dies down.
That's unfortunately yes.
But as you know, we have a remember section here on Unboxing TNT, and we're going to recall everything that went on for the past couple of years under the various sectors, just as to where they would have failed or where they would have been successful in certain things, where the revenue comes from, where the expenditure goes, as we unbox TNT sectors on the next couple of episodes. And let me remind everyone to know, subscribe, hit that like and subscribe button, follow along on social media. And because I'm recovering from a cold, which my colleague identified to you at the very beginning, be sure to take your vitamin C and lots of fluids. There's a mean virus going around.
And in that way, do your part to stem the spread of influenza.
Correct.
But in Aaron, as we say, if you do your part,
And I
and
do my part, then
then
together,
together we do our
our
part.
part.
Until next time, this is Unboxing TNT signing out. Be safe. Take care.
Alright, guys. Bye bye.